Welcome back to Trailblazers Courtside. Jordan Kent alongside Michael Holton. Portland in the middle of a 2-game road trip. As you know, Michael, they're getting set to take on the Dallas Mavericks for the second time in 3 games. And for more on the Blazers, we now welcome in the Oregonians' Joe Freeman. And Joe, before we start talking about any basketball, I have to get your thoughts on yesterday's Super Bowl, of course.
Oh, it was an incredible game. Well, incredible finish. I was sort of going the other way. You know, the Patriots have certainly had plenty of success, so I was sort of pulling for the Falcons. So from that standpoint, it was hard to swallow. But man, for sheer entertainment value, it was everything you'd want out of a game like that.
So I have a question for both you and Michael. When you get a situation like this where it's a team like New England that's won year after year, and we've seen this in the NBA with some teams as well too, they're on the precipice of greatness, yet there's another team that could taste greatness for the first time ever. Do you want to see history made in that situation, or do you want to see some new flavor have a taste of that championship success?
Depends on from my perspective, it depends on the personalities involved, and it depends on what level of greatness the team is striving for, and it depends on how long this run has been. You know, the Warriors last year, with the season that they had, and the style of brand of basketball they play that's so exciting, and their passing and just, you know, they kind of turned into a little bit of a villain at the end, but along the way they were pretty darn fun to watch. I would have been fine with them winning last year to cement that historical season. But it really depends on the personalities that are involved and how long the run's been. So for me, it's a case-by-case basis.
Mike, what about you?
It's a great question, first of all.
Thank you. That's my job.
I'm not a big football guy, but I had picked Atlanta. I was pulling for Atlanta, and I don't know anybody on Atlanta other than Julio Jones. I think that's his name, right?
That's his name?
Yeah, that's the only guy I know. And the quarterback got the MVP. That was all I knew, right? But I knew Tom Brady. I knew Bill Belichick. Belichick, right? So I was pulling for Atlanta. So
well, let's be real, though, guys. Like, the Patriots are pretty easy to dislike on a lot of different levels. Now, I appreciate fans from New England and from Boston and everything loving them. Of course, if any of us were from there, it would be the same. But, you know, in part because of their success, in part because of the controversy that has surrounded them multiple times over the years, and for even more reasons, there's many reasons to root against the Patriots in particular.
Understandable, and I'm sure we could probably spend another half hour unpacking that for sure. But
No
Joe,
question.
let's get to the Blazers right now, and they're in the midst of this mini road trip right now. They're just coming off the loss to OKC. They get a rematch against Dallas, and looking at this Dallas game specifically, how different do you think that this will be now that you could say the Blazers have had a chance to play against Yogi Ferrell and they're more aware of what Dallas can do as a team as a whole this time around?
Well, I think it'll be significantly different. First of all, you know, anytime Wesley Matthews steps on the court in Portland, he's going to be going out for blood. So you've got a little bit of extra motivation with him in an environment like that. But look, going into that game, the Blazers' own scouting reports that they read and went over before the game said to go under screens on Yogi Ferrell. And then next thing you know, a dude who was in the D-League a while ago, who's on a 10-day contract, makes 9 of 11 threes. So, you know, their scouting reports pretty much got thrown out. And by the time that they decided to change it up, it was too late. He had already gotten hot. He had, momentum going. And so, I think they'll guard him drastically different. I think the motivation factor for the Blazers will be different, simply because of looking to erase the sting or at least exact a little bit of pain or a little bit of payback from that loss. So I think it's going to be quite a bit of a different game personally.
And you bring up an interesting point. You get this performance from Ferrell here at the Moda Center that is clearly a career night for him. And then even Westbrook, to a degree, against OKC, his second half performance, 31 points, and he's hitting pull-up jumpers that he normally doesn't hit on a consistent basis. So if you're the Blazers and you look at the way that you were playing prior to Dallas and OKC, you won 4 out of 5, you really were looking very solid in a lot of capacities. Are there times where you just have to tip your cap to another player when he has a performance like that can almost overcome any type of potential scouting report or defensive scheme you throw?
It depends on the player and the night. Certainly, when Russell Westbrook picks up 42, the guy's averaging a triple-double, so, that's not that unheard of. When a guy like Yogi, Ferrell burns you like he did, that's just one of those nights where you say, look, you beat us going against your strength. So, you just have to tip your hat. But this has been a team that, from virtually day one has given up big nights to a lot of different players. I mean, you look way back to their game against Cleveland at Cleveland when Kevin Love had the big first quarter and had the career night. And then, you just can go on down the line from Marc Gasol to Paul George to Kevin Durant to DeMarcus Cousins, Kawhi Leonard, on and on. Individuals have had big nights against the Blazers. And so from that standpoint, I think there, obviously there's rightful concern. But on a night when a guy on a 10-day puts up 32 on you, that's just, you're like, well, it wasn't our night.
Joe, let me ask you about that. This time of the season, your scouting report is kind of your blueprint, your roadmap. There's not a whole lot of surprises in the NBA. I mean, the scouting report's good, scouting's great, you know where you stand. But when you get the unknown, the unexpected, the Yogi Ferrell, do you think it highlights your ability to make in-game adjustments?
Definitely, and just to where your athleticism is, man to man, whether or not you're a more talented player, I think that has a lot to do with it. And like you mentioned, on the fly for coaches to find the right individual matchup to monopolize on or capitalize on too. So, in a way, yes, but also look, when a guy is putting up 32 on you and shooting, making 9 of 11 threes, at some point that's on you to be like, I'm not going to let him shoot again too. Now, he was ridiculous that night. He hit that big 3 in transition late, which I think, put an exclamation point on his night. But a lot of his stuff in the first half, he was wide open because I think he was shooting 25% from three-point range, somewhere in that range going into the game. So, when that happens, you either need to adjust on the fly and say, hey, he's gonna keep hitting this, or you have to hope that he starts to cool off. And I think the Blazers let it go a little too long. But Stotts did make an adjustment. He put Evan Turner on him to start the second half, so they did change things up after halftime.
Joe, let me ask you, do you think that the current rules of how you defend perimeter players, you talk about Kevin Love's big night, and those were threes, and you talk about Yogi, and those were perimeter shots. Not being able to touch and guard, I mean, I'm old school. You knock a guy down after 2-3 made field goals, and you get a couple free throws, and you give him that look like, man, you take another one, this is how it's going to be. But the game is different today, and when perimeter players get on fire, you can't stop them.
Yeah, and when you look at, one of the Blazers' own players is a prototypical example of this. When Dame's pulling up shots from just past half court, we've seen it with Stephen Curry too. Those shots are, you can't defend those. But look, Michael, you and I are going to disagree on this because I don't want to see a return to the Pat Riley Knicks of the 90s. I don't want to see these knockdown, drag-out, 92 to 87 basketball games. I don't think they were aesthetically pleasing. I don't think they were good for the game. I want to see ball movement. I want to see quick offense. I want to see long-range shooting. I want to see, a team that looks connected and together and plays a fast-paced offensive brand of basketball. I think from an entertainment value for the game, it's better, and just a sheer enjoyment as a fan, I think it's better. And really for the league, I think it's better. The league is as healthy and as profitable and as popular right now as it's ever been. And so, sometimes you can't stop those guys, but look, these are the best athletes in the world, and that's why you go, pay your hard-earned money to watch these games.
Joe, I agree with you in everything that you said. The league is wonderful, and I'm a part of a wonderful league, and I want to ride the wave. But I want to see more competitiveness defensively when guys get hot, so I need some occasional fouling.
Can we agree on this, though? Can we have fouling that isn't like, hack a Shaq or hack a Dwight or something like that? Because I can't stand that. So if you're going to knock a guy down to prove a point and give a hard foul, I'm no problem there as long as it doesn't result in the guy getting his career stumbled.
I believe in fair competitive play, but I'm just talking about the Saturday morning you lose, you got to sit a couple game type of foul.
you need an extra ice bath after the game.
There you go. All right.
No, I'm all for that. I'll give you that.
All right.
Joe, I'm curious to get your thoughts. The Blazers definitely made an adjustment to their starting lineup about 6 or 7 games ago. Evan Turner, especially in that backcourt starting lineup spot with Dame and CJ. What are your thoughts on how the three of them have been able to play together so far and the way that it has affected the bench rotation too?
Yeah, that was sort of the original catalyst behind the move was to set the rotation a little bit, to kind of change that up. And I think it was also to make the most of Evan's defensive ability. And what we've seen as a byproduct is Evan Turner is playing, arguably the best basketball of the season. A guy who was sort of a scapegoat for their troubles early on is really playing well, and even in their losses, he's doing a little bit of everything to help, in a positive way. So I think that's been a benefit. And also, Aminu and Harkless are sort of adjusting to their new roles off the bench, but in many ways, particularly with Aminu, it does suit him because he can sort of just, go buck wild, if you will, and use his athleticism to his advantage. And Lord knows he's been shooting a lot lately, so he's going to have more scoring chances or more shot attempts on the bench. But I like the way it stacks the rotation. I like that, for whatever reason, Evan and Allen Crabbe, they didn't have good on-court chemistry. For whatever reason, their games didn't gel together. And I think that moving Evan to that starting lineup and then shifting, Rook and Mo down there with Allen has kind of helped both lineups a lot. I mean, before that kind of really a forgettable loss against Dallas, the Blazers were playing, probably their best basketball of the season, or at least playing a lot better to win at Boston, to earn a solid win against the Grizzlies at home. Those were good wins. And that was fueled in part by that lineup change. And look, the way things were headed and just the general feel around the team, I think you had to do something. And I think on the whole, so far, those changes have been good. Now we still have, a lot of time to figure out, how that's going to work out. And the proof is definitely in the pudding. But I like the changes and what I've seen as a result of the changes.
You mentioned a lot of time left in the season still. When you look at the handful of teams fighting for the 8th spot in the West, Portland being amongst them, at what point do you really start to consider, okay, we've got to start playing ourselves into that position and really start sort of looking at the standings and analyzing things? Or is that something that teams don't really worry about as they go from things game to game?
Well, if you ask them, and Lord knows I've asked variations of that question multiple times, not only recently, but for long stretches this season, they have really tried to adopt the boring, Bull Durham cliche, one game at a time kind of thing. And their whole thing is that if they build it one game at a time, you look back and you've won 6 in a row, or you look back and all of a sudden you've cemented your status as the 8th seed. If you just sort of look at that as the end goal, it's not going to help you get there. And I certainly agree to that to a certain extent. But the problem with this team right now is that for every positive momentum that they build, or for every step of progress that they make, one night later, 2 nights later, they squander it all away with a bad loss. So, you get the momentum of what we've seen. Like I said, a huge win at Boston in overtime, solid win against the Grizzlies at home. Then next thing, you're losing to Dallas at home, and you had won 4 or 5 or whatever, and then, with the snap of a finger, you've squandered all your momentum. And so many times we've seen that this season. And for me, that's the biggest surprise with this team is it's still a very young team age-wise in the NBA, but you sort of thought that they took their lumps last year and kind of figured out how to be more consistent. And right now we're still seeing an inconsistent team that is reflective of its age. So we have seen progress, but we haven't seen it stick. And so I think for this team, getting back to your original question, they don't look at, well, we need to get going now, because they've been trying to get going for weeks and months, certainly. And so their single mindset right now tonight is shutting down Yogi Ferrell and shutting down Wesley Matthews and shutting down the Mavericks tonight at Dallas, or tomorrow in Dallas.
All right, thanks a lot, Joe. We appreciate you joining us. That is Joe Freeman from the Oregonian.